I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as outlined.
Mayor, I will make a motion to approve the agenda.
A motion, do I have a second? Give me a second, Craig. Wait.
Second. Second.
All right.
Roll call.
Yeah, roll call.
Staley, aye.
Clef eye.
Ivy, aye.
Ward eye.
I probably don't.
Coates eye.
All right, item 2, discussion on a possible tribute plaque being placed at the Washington City ball fields. Let me get out of this. I want to. Okay, may I take a minute and read this? In the late 1970s, Coach Tom Jensen saw the need for his boys and for all the boys in Washington to have a place to play baseball. Through his occupation as an employee of the BLM, Coach Jensen was able to acquire a large tract of land in the northeast corner of Washington for $1. Note, this property is also now the location of Washington Elementary, a library, and a community center, all for $1. With the help of local, fathers and volunteers along with their equipment, Tom led the endeavor to construct the original baseball field, which is now the home of the Washington Little League. Tom went on to coach many young men in Washington and taught them many lessons about baseball and life. Just a side note, the sponsor for that was our brand new organized Lions Club. So they were the ones that sponsored our team. This request is to ask for permission to honor Coach Tom Jensen by naming the original Northwest Little League field Coach Tom Jensen Field. We are asking permission to name the field in his honor and place a small plaque in his honor between the 2 flagpoles in center field. All costs associated with the project will be covered by the Jensen family as well as a few private donors. I've made contact with our Little League and they are supportive of this idea, and if and when permission is given from City Council, as the city current owners of the field, I feel this is a wonderful opportunity to continue the legacy of a great man who made a great decision a few years ago. So I just bring that up for you, because it would be a council decision to do so. I think we could work with Barry and Cole to see, exactly where we would place that. So they wanted to do this the first day of Little League, but it's times of the essence now, and so they'll either do it, and the 2 people driving this are Tom's son Bob Jensen, quarterback for BYU for a couple of years, and he lives in Fillmore, and Burke Staley, and so they would be willing to maybe inaugurate this at the end of the season, or they'll even be willing to wait till next year. So it's not, if you approve to do this, then we do have some time. Any discussion on that?
Is there a cost associated with this that we're aware of right now?
No, they're going to cover all the costs.
So they'll cover the cost, you just want the opportunity to place it up there.
Right.
I don't want to go too far down memory lane, take some time, but I remember when it was just a ball field. And just recently in the last month, I was able to spend some time with Bob. And he shared some memories of his dad and kind of refreshed my memory of what he did, and there's always great people behind great ideas. And I certainly am in support of this.
All right, support it too, Mayor.
Any other thoughts? So if you're in support of it, all of you, I think the next step would be to have Bob and Bert get with you guys. Would that be fine, Barry?
Yeah.
And work out, they talked to you about it, okay, and work out the particulars. You're okay with that? Okay.
Do we know where and what the size and where it's going to go on the field?
The plaque is going to go in between the 2 flagpoles on the other side of the fence. And I think that's where you would probably put the name of the field, if you choose to. I mean, you could choose not to name it the Tom Jensen Field and maybe just have a plaque, but the request is to do both.
Mayor, if I may clarify, and we're just talking about one of the fields. the
One that,
the
yeah, that
original
northeast
field.
corner field,
Just the one.
the actual Little League field. All right, let's move on. We'll, I'll let the parties know that they can start moving forward. Okay, I can't get to my computer. Can I look at it? Item 2, discussion and review of possible affording housing project by the Blackstone Property Group. Brady, are you Brady?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to connect to the AirPlay real quick. And I think you get to see a shot of my son while I do this. Seal Council Room 2. Okay, thank you for letting us come and present this. Bruce Dickerson and Ben Willits are here. I think everyone knows Ben. Bruce has been developing in St. George for 40 years. And then they let me come and talk about some of the very basics. Bruce can cover some of the things that I don't cover real quickly. I don't think any of us are at odds with the fact that there's a critical need for affordable housing in the city, although I think that we do assert that the crisis is much more of an emergency than we've observed in most of the cities with whom we've been working over the last 3 or 4 years. I have 3 things that I do in real estate. We have a rental company. I manage rental properties from Park City down to Washington County. It doesn't matter right now if it is a $5,500 a month townhome in Park City that I'm renting. Story after story, as they moved here from California, they're going to build out in Promontory or something, and then they get here and they go, okay, we're not going to be able to do this for 1.5 years, so our 6-month lease now needs to be a year lease. And then they go, okay, forget it, we're not building at all. Now we're going to buy. Can you help us buy? And I go, yeah, I can help you buy. And there's nothing that they can afford. And so it doesn't matter if it's $5,500 a month or $900 a month starter, kids that just got married, there is nothing for them to buy. They're stuck in the rentals. And I find when there is a vacancy, we put it back on the market and it's about 1 day. Less than a day is what the average stats are in Washington, but it's less than a day for vacancy rates. I'm the principal broker of the Blackstone Property Group. We have sold so far in January, just this month alone on buyers and sales, about $5.4 million. So I started this back in the day before the crash. I dug out where the one company was doing nothing, the other company, I was daily 2 hours a day spending all my time calling for sell by owners. And then the market turned into short sales and I was at foreclosure sales doing flips. And so I've seen the market slowly come back, and I was in the trenches in the front lines and it was a living hell. But about 2012, things started to turn, and our agents in there were saying, wow, we're having a hard time. Everyone stopped building and now we're having a hard time finding things to buy. And so the number one topic that I have in every sales meeting that we ever have is affordability. There's nothing that we can buy. I used to love it when people would say, hey, can you help? I'm selling a house. Can you help me buy? Yeah, there's no problem. Now it's the dreaded buyer's agent. Is if anyone says, can you help me buy? Everyone goes, because there's nothing. Right now, starter homes, and this is not hyperbole, do not exist. For newly marrieds, renting couples, renters who want to leave the rental market, the household being created right now far exceed the number of houses being built. Kids living at home, newly marrieds, are living with parents. Other creative households are being created, and they're not even part of the statistics. There's people in my neighborhood have 2 married couples living with them, and there's cars all along the street. I have a rental right now of kids who said, hey, I know it's only 3 people. We have 4. And I go, oh, you can't do 4. And they go, well, let me tell you, we only have 2 cars because we're 2 couples that are married, and we're going to live together because that's the only thing that we can do. And so that's what's going on as far as sales go. There's nothing that people can buy. If people come and say, I talked to my lender, it's $350,000. That's all I can do. I go, I don't know what you're going to do. Let's give it a shot. It's going to be a really rough fixer-upper, or it's going to be nothing. Or you need to save a lot of money to put down because it's really nothing. The last thing I do is I work with Bruce on development, and I'll let Bruce talk details about the project, but right now I'm the salesman, and I'm astounded at the need and the feedback from the buyers who come to us just word of mouth on the marketing that we've done on the projects that we have up in Springville and Provo and Orem. If you want a stable community and an overwhelmingly positive impact on your city that's at emergency levels and needed in Washington, it's affordable entry-level housing where kids can come live, get in the housing market, and not throw their money away on rent. There's a couple stats really quickly. This was this morning. This is what's available in Washington City. Under $200,000, FHA approved. There's a 55 and older community, and then trailer park, trailer home, trailer home, trailer home. There's one other trailer home that didn't show on the slide, but 4 trailer homes and 1 55 older. So if I'm a young couple, I go, I love Washington, I want to live here. I got 200,000. You don't live in Washington.
What was your search parameter that was under what?
Under $200,000, Washington City, FHA approved. And so there were 11 that were under 200,000 that were not FHA approved. So 6 more, but our project is going to be FHA approved. And so, which makes all the difference to kids. Our contention is not whether providing affordable housing is important to the city. Everyone knows there's a problem with affordable housing, but few see how big it is and what the effects actually are. There's article after article here talking about how cities around are actually outlawing single-family residential zones and saying that's kind of the enemy right now, is that we're saying, yeah, this whole area needs to be single family because that's the the golden dream. But in Oregon, they actually banned single family zoning and said all single family zones up to a 4-plex, you can put that in there as long as it kind of fits, because affordability, that's the best thing that they've come up with. Everything else that they've done has been crashed and burned. By the Cato Institute here, the conclusion here was we need to not only start looking at single family zoning, but we need to look at commercial zoning. We need to stop hanging on to commercial zoning and start putting affordable housing in. That was the same thing with the American Institute of Economic Research. The nemesis of housing affordability is zoning. The conclusion of the National Home Builders Association is at every level there are 2 challenges: the thought that everybody needs to live in a single family neighborhood, and the reluctance to let go of undeveloped commercial areas that could be supported if there was more surrounding housing. We've owned this property for 17 years. Bruce has been trying to sell it. He actually sold the corner and it went into foreclosure and he bought it back. He's a commercial developer. He's developed all kinds of commercial here and up in Orem, Provo, everywhere else. And he has yet to get a phone call in 17 years from someone saying, hey, can I buy that parcel from you? I've been actively selling this property on the MLS, on LoopNet, CoStar, at websites, as a hotel, as a commercial piece, as just raw land. And I've yet in over a year to receive a phone call from any agent or anybody saying, hey, the only one I did was a guy who said, can I park my car on your property? And that's the only phone call that I've got since we've had that there. So in conclusion, we're just going to play this video, then Bruce can give you any details, answer questions. Just gonna, this is in Orem. The ones that we're proposing here are 3-story. These are 4-story. Winco is to the top right. So this is a prime commercial area that this is sitting in right here. That's Winco right there.
We never purchased before, and getting one was always fun. After meeting with our lenders, we knew we happen right now. We didn't have a huge credit history and things that we thought would be nice. We were pretty disappointed when we started looking. Not only were there no homes before, the ones that we could afford were sadly not approved for FHA loans. We heard about these condos and we were exactly what we were looking for. We put one under contract, put down 3.5% and could not be happier.
This is the other one in Orem, right next to I-15, 1 block from Walmart.
We had been looking to move because rents were so high, but there was nothing else that we could afford. We didn't want to keep throwing our money away, so we started looking. Affordable starter homes no longer exist. They are now called townhomes, and they are $350,000. Buying a fixer upper wouldn't work either because we were getting an FHA loan. Finding these tunnels was huge for us. They're so nice and new, full of people our age, and they were at a price we could afford. The best part is that our payment for our condo is less than your payment for rent.
This is just inside the actual units, 2-bed, 1-bath.
When our daughter got married, we knew it would either become live with us or co-sign on the loan with them if we could find a starter place. We wanted them to be able to do like we did and buy a place, build some equity, sell it, buy another, and then eventually buy a family home that started as that first small house. The housing market in Utah is no more easy to purchase affordable homes. The new starter home is a $350,000 townhome. We were lucky to buy these condos, and when we learned that they were FHA approved, so we could co-sign with her on her first home, we were more than happy to do it. She now has enough equity that when she sells this place, she can afford the next step without it, and hopefully the next.
Bruce knows more than I do, except for how to do that PowerPoint stuff.
No electronics whatsoever. I think you know the project. We've talked about it. I've been trying to figure out something to do with this property for a long time. Mr. Spilker and I bought this ground 17 years ago, and he developed Bristol Park, and I was involved with that for a while. And then I ended up with the C2 piece at the end, and I've been trying to figure out what to do. I got in these affordable housing units for my children. I have 4 children, and when they came, they're 40 years old now, but when they came along, I wanted something affordable. So I've been doing this for 45 years. And the key behind this is to have FHA approved condominiums. If you look on the books of FHA, they have not got a condominium or project approved in the state of Utah since 2005. Now there's townhomes, but stacked condominium units. They are the gorilla that makes this work for the cities, because they make us, there's a stack of stuff, and it's like learning to ride a bike. Once you know how to do it, you know how to do it. But if you talk to other developers or anybody, they don't want to even tackle this, so it's so hard. So these people can get in for 3.5%. They can assume it. You can co-sign with your children. Like Brady, he has young children. That's what I did with all of my children. Chuck got me down here to Washington County years ago to start playing golf. And I've lived down here, and I have a home, and so between here and there. And now we just think this would be a perfect place for it to happen. But obviously, I'm to the point of my life that if you don't want it, then let's just move on, because I'm wore out.
17 years worth of wear out. I can
Yeah,
understand.
I'm almost 70 years old, and so these young bucks that are coming along say, Bruce, let's do this. I go, okay, I'll keep trying for a little while, but I don't want to keep trying much longer. I just want to go on. Some guy wants to buy it and put storage units on it, but I've met with the HOA president of Bristol personally, and his name's Andy Palmer. And he said, we don't want commercial there. We would love to have this affordable housing. What I can tell you, of over the 500 units that I've developed in the last 4 years, 16 of them have changed hands is all. Most of these people, 90% of them are young marrieds with either not any children or a child on the way. Another 10% are retired folks like myself that have lost a wife or a husband, and they move out. The one that comes to mind is a lady who bought one, and I said, well, it's only 2-bedroom, 1 bath. What are you going to do? She says, I don't want my children visiting me anyway. I want to go visit them. I don't want them coming and visit me. So how do we protect this for the city? We do something that no one else does, and that is we put deed restrictions on the units. So if somebody buys it as a rental, it remains as a rental for life. They can convert it to an owner-occupied, but if it's an owner-occupied unit, they can't convert it to a rental. That is a deed restriction that we put on the project. So it doesn't matter who is the HOA, it doesn't matter who comes in to buy it, it can't change from a rental. You can't have a big rental project. So projects that I've developed back 40 years ago, they're still working and it's still happening. FHA requires 50% of this to be owner occupied. We go a step further. We go to 60%. And so at least 60% is just going to be owner occupied. So that's a deed restriction. It's in our CCNRs. It's in our rules and regs. And how do we enforce it? It's pretty simple. They sign a document when they close and says, and then we can start fining them. And we can fine them starting out $50, $100. And if they keep going, it goes up to $500. And it stood the test of time in court. So that's all I know. Any questions I can answer?
Could you clarify for me on what can be, what can change, what can't change? Because you started an owner occupied, will stay owner occupied. Then you talked about the rental scenario.
Well, what
Trying to
happens
understand
is we have to, for this to be FHA, they maintain 50% of it can be owner occupied.
Correct.
But we will put in a development agreement with the city that we'll take it a step further, that it'll be 60% owner occupied. And so if somebody buys a unit that's owner occupied, it will stay an owner occupied unit. We put a restriction on that deed so they can't transfer it to, and if somebody comes in and starts renting it, then we always have an on-site manager, even this size, that will enforce these.
So on a case-by-case scenario, I'm just thinking, what if someone's like, I can afford it, but my in-laws can't, and I'm going to buy it for them and they rent it from me? Is that still considered owner-occupied, or does it have to be the person that buys it? I mean, is there a direct relation of
It has to be a
family?
direct relation.
Okay, so that's still acceptable, as you could rent it for my.
If they think that's going to happen, then we designate that as a rental unit.
Well, what I'm saying is, say you, because
If-
aren't these locked in by deed? So I buy this property, I got to live in it. But say I get older and I'm like, okay, I'm going to now move up, but my parents are getting older. I need to move them into this, and it's a good swap or whatever.
Yeah, you can do that.
Do that,
Yeah,
and it still be owner occupied.
Correct.
But anything outside of the
correct. So like my children could buy one with me, but they have to live there. Now, if they decide they don't want to live there anymore, then they have to sell it as an owner-occupied unit, which it hasn't happened. Now, how do we maintain that this is affordability? Well, we're the lowest price thing in any market. And so it will float up with the market. We hope it goes up in value. So the people that are buying it will have some equity when they get ready to get out of it. But if we're the lowest thing in town, it'll always be the lowest in town. It's always been the case. I just got 200 units approved in
that
Hurricane.
was one of the concerns that came up early on in some of the discussions is the maintaining of both the affordability, but also the desirability of the project. So, but the FHA loan, that really only applies to the first owner, is that?
No, it can, in order to get FHA approval, you get approval and it's a commitment for them for 2 years. Then anytime a unit transfers sale, you have to send in a new report to FHA saying how much are owner occupied and how much are not. Now, the people that buy in these units, they want to protect their investment. So they want to make sure that owner occupied stay at the level that FHA will approve their loan.
But that will also be done by the governance of the project, is right?
Yes, and we set it up that way. And you can go back and look at time, and we have some that are 40 years old and they're still FHA approved. What happens to projects like this is they don't put the deed restriction in. So they turn and people then start renting them, and more renters come and more renters come, and before you have it as a big rental project. But since we restrict that, then that protects it so that it protects their investment as an owner occupied unit, and then they can sell it to a new FHA buyer who has to be qualified. FHA on this, so you understand, they still use local lenders. FHA just guarantees the loan through a local lender. This isn't subsidized housing. This isn't anything like that. This is just, it's insured. And for us to get approval for this project takes us probably 6 months to get it approved through Denver and to get the FHA approval. But that's part of what I'm willing to do as a developer behind this, is to put a development agreement together that says this will be FHA approved. We limit 2 adults per condo because there's only 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. So they sign that they know that there's only going to be 2 adults, and in this unit there's not going to be 3 or 4. If that comes along, then they know it, they've signed it, and they get fined.
You know, I don't have a question, but maybe a comment for our residents that may watch this at home. The idea of affordability nowadays means vertical.
Total.
Years ago, you could afford to buy a single unit, but now you've got to go vertical to attain that level. Just wanted to make that point.
Yeah. And this density and affordability, what I have found is you look at the videos earlier and the properties that I've used, they are in commercial areas. Because who doesn't want affordability? Nobody wants it in their neighborhood. But Bristol Park is in favor of it. And I went and knocked every one of their doors because I knew a lot of them from the days of old. And they want this there, and they don't want the commercial.
Can I ask a quick question? These, you've clarified, are 2 bedroom, 1 bath. What's the basic square footage of these?
900 square feet.
Okay. And within that,
Is that correct?
Between 900 and 950.
9 and 950, that's pretty good enough. One of the questions that I have is I see pricing, and what's been a big struggle for our council and our community that's been forced upon us is to delineate the difference between what is affordable housing and attainable housing. And nobody wants to give you a definition, but they're both being thrown out there quite well. You've talked about within your development agreement and the time frame that you have. One of the most common concerns given to us when things are proposed is for people to be able to make their money, the bottom line. How we got to do this so we can make our money, and we got to kind of stay out of this to some degree. But I am curious, at what point into how long would you certify that those prices would stay at $180,000?
Just the market.
So as the market continues to go up, that's just your base rate of where we're at?
It'll go up, and I hope it does for people that buy it. Because I had a couple of mine that bought in the very first unit at $129,000 4 years ago. The very first project you saw, they just sold it for $188,000.
Well, in all fun, I remember going down Telegraph and looking at the condos, further to the east, and I could tell the market by the latest sign that came up. All affordable housing, 149, 159, 199, 249. And it's amazing how that affordable number fluctuated within a year. And so when I'm looking at this, one of my main concerns that I have is we're selling this as affordable housing at this moment. But by the time your loans may come through in Denver, that new number might be $200,000. And that's our new affordable.
I can guarantee you that the 180 will stay for a long time because I've owned this ground for a long time. What happens is the ground that, I don't know if the word is correct, but jingled, meaning everybody knows about it. Well, the price is too high and I can't bring affordability on it. I can bring affordability to this property. I have no intention of raising it 180 above that. It's perfect for me, But at the same time, then when I leave, how long is it going to take me to build this? I'm not a fast builder and a developer. I do one building, then move on to the next building, move on to the next building, move on to the next building. That's how I do it. I'm not come in and build 60, 81 units in a day. So 180,000 is what I'm projecting, and I don't see a need for it to go up. But I hope by the time we get done, people have equity in their units. But affordability is still going to be there. It's FHA. And until somebody comes and builds a cheaper unit in this community, that will be the affordability, the most affordable. So if somebody comes and starts building one bedroom and sell them for $120,000, then they're going to be more affordable than me. But I haven't seen that yet. And I've done 1,000 of these doors. Same contractor. We know how to do it. We have the prices, and we can deliver the product, and we can meet FHA standards.
Thank you.
Bruce, just
Yeah.
a quick question on how many units are in each building? I see there's 5 units. for 5
16.
buildings.
4 times 4?
Well, you
4
said
times
there's
3?
a total of 81 units. I just don't.
They're
know how many per
3-story
building.
high.
15, 14, 14. I think the ones on the right are smaller, and the ones on the left are.
Or a little bigger. So 14 to 15 is that?
Yeah.
Give or take, okay. So my one question is, it is commercial, and in Washington, we have the problem of we don't have enough commercial as far as on our high profiles. We don't have a lot of land left for commercial. One of the thoughts that came through my mind through this process is there an opportunity on the corner to have a small commercial and integrate the parking with the homes and the commercial at the same time? So you can double dip the parking and overlap it, but still have a small piece of commercial.
That's the piece we sold and they foreclosed on, and I bought it back.
Yeah, I'm just,
There is, the other thing that we've proposed to your council and you before is doing a transfer fee that will generate you more money than the taxes from that commercial ground.
now, maybe you can go through that again.
Brady, can you explain that?
Is that a transfer fee on sales? of
On
units?
sales. And for the first year, well, there it is. He's projecting. Do you have time to look at this and discuss it? You want to discuss it?
Yeah, real quickly, I've developed in Park City, and Park City has a thing where you have to do 1%, and it goes to Park City, and it ends up being like $18,000. And so we offered 0.25% of the sales price as a transfer fee. So the initial sales revenue at 180,000 times 81 would be about $36,000 just on our initial sales. And then ongoing sales revenue estimate would be about 5,700. So at a closing from title to be paid to the city out of the sale would be the little transfer fee. And so it's another concession that we're willing to give.
So just as a clarification though, and the councilman, so that would be, what you're saying is that is a better advantage to the city than on the property tax we collect, but not the sales tax that might be collected on whatever use might be there.
No.
I figured that's what you meant, but I just wanted to be clear.
Well, no, it's on
So,
the sales tax too. 'Cause
well, you don't,
we
we don't know what
figured out-
use, we don't know.
We put a little strip mall in there and said, okay, this is how much sales we're gonna have. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't that what we
Yeah.
did?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you can explain it.
Oh,
So
we,
strip mall, you assume would have less than $5,000
Yeah.
of tax money
yeah,
a year?
Bruce has owned a burger joint. So he said, what if there's a successful burger joint there that's making this much? And there's a little strip mall, a copy center, nails plus, that kind of thing. They're making this much. And since he's owned some things up in Orem, we said, okay. And you know what eventually might come to the city is around 5,700 is what we estimated. We have a hotel approved on it right now. We said $1.5 million, the transient tax. You guys will end up with about 4,000. Why don't we put the sales transfer fee on there? So every time one is sold in the CCNRs, the title company sees it that, oh, we owe the city 0.25% of the sales of the purchase price. So that can fluctuate. So it's not just a set price. So it'll go up as they go up. And
Is it, the question I'm hearing, and I don't know if he's answering it, is that more money than the property tax and the sales tax, or is it equal to?
I don't know what the property tax would be, but what we're thinking is that it's going to be sixes. Well, we think it's far more advantageous to put affordable housing in your city with all the 81 people shopping around here. But if we put the sales transfer fee in there, it'll be nearly 6 as to where a mediocre commercial development would be in there.
But I think one of my concerns is in a great market, yeah, we're gonna get a lot of sales, but in a down market, we're not gonna get any dollars to the city. And then a standard commercial would bring in revenue probably consistently.
My commercial is down market, is vacant.
Yeah. And down market.
I think it's both the same. Down market commercial is vacant, they're not selling much. I mean, I've owned these kind of units for 40 years and never have they ever had a dip in the down market. They're always the most affordable. They're just, they transfer because people, they need somewhere to live. They're young families.
And what
What's
we're,
interesting is these people end up staying here for 5, 6 years, 7 years.
that's what we're seeing is that even in
Yeah,
an
they-
up market, they're not as moving as much as they would be on a regular market because people are watching their equity go up and they're not selling because they're still hard to find. They've got 40,000 in equity. That's still not enough to go and find another home.
But if the price goes up, then you get more money.
And I think I'm more concerned about the steadiness of the money from a commercial side. And like I said, I don't know, like, I agree with you. It goes up and down based on if you have residency. But if nobody's, you're just telling me also people are holding on to them a lot longer, so, you know.
Yeah, we're
not-
And you're basing this off not a 1 year, you're basing on per sold.
Well, the 36,450 is after we've sold it out. So that is gonna be, that's gonna set you way ahead of the game for the next 4 or 5 years than what you're gonna get off commercial sales tax.
So we don't want you to base anything off of, they're making it 6s on the sales transfer fee. We're just saying as an additional concession to much needed affordable housing, we'll do this because we know it's a sacrifice for the city to give up commercial. We'll try and make good on that as much as we can with the sales transfer fee. So we're not saying this is going to wipe out all commercial. This is saying you're going to give up this commercial, you get affordable housing, and we're going to give you a little bit more. And on top of the deed restrictions, we're also going to do this.
Can I ask one question?
Maybe. What's the question, Bruce?
Should we proceed moving ahead or should we not? That's all I need is thumbs up, thumbs down. You tell me what you want me to do. Is that a fair question?
I'm just teasing about the
Okay.
question, Bruce.
Hey, Bruce, Brady, Ben, each of you, I appreciate you coming tonight. And I appreciate you presenting in this setting, that this is the right setting for this. And we definitely don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? There's
No,
a zone change that would come through the proper
there's a plan
channels.
commission and all that.
And
Should I
would
proceed with
and I
that?
would encourage you to proceed with that. And once that zone change, if that zone change passes, then this is something that certainly I think I can't speak for the entire council, but I can speak for my 1/5 part. I would entertain listening. I do like the idea of the transfer fee to offset lost revenue of what a potential C2 piece could offer, but I understand also that it's been sitting vacant for 17 years. So from my standpoint, I think it's worth pursuing and
Okay.
letting both bodies review it.
One of the reasons we moved this to this night was to have staff here. I'd like to have staff come up, and I know that we've had this presented at least one other time, not in here, but I know, yeah, Drew, if you would, and just give staff perspective on the. Well, I'll just give you the open mic wherever you want to jump in.
Well, as I was watching the numbers come up, I was out there playing on my calculator just to see what our code has right now. They're basically asking for 22 dwelling units per acre. If I'm close, it should be. That's what you have 3.7 acres, roughly the whole thing, 81 units is 22 dwelling units per acre. I don't have a designation in the city. Our highest is 16. We have allowed some PCDs, but again, those are big master developments. So that's something council and the developer need to be aware of. The parking, if they're all 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Our standard right now for parking is 2 parking stalls for a 2 or 3-bedroom unit. At 81, that's 162. The new visitor parking standard would be another 23. So they're 41 stalls shy. I'm just throwing, it's not that I'm for or against, I'm just throwing these out for both parties to know just right off the bat that I saw. So the parking issues and the dwelling units per acre, they're higher than what the city has on the books right now. So the council would have to, or you guys would have to find something creative on that somehow, or they come back and, on the acreage, again, it would have to, take down some dwelling units, some parking, et cetera. That's just right off the top that I was seeing, for both.
Sorry, can you say the last thing again? Take down some acreage, or what was your?
Well, you'd have to meet if we're going to hold firm on our 16 dwelling units per acre, roughly if someone can do it just as fast as I can.
It's 3.72, what you said, acres.
It's basically 3.7. So times that by 16.
60 dwelling units.
How many?
60.
So we're talking a difference of 21 units and 41 parking stalls between what the code allows for and what they're proposing. So, so I just want that's really my comments on it. Again, I'm not against it. I always try to protect commercial land too, but I also know we're going into a new age of people buy everything on the internet. Half my household right now, I'm the half that doesn't. My wife is the half that does, buys everything online. So she's part of the, getting rid of the brick and mortar. I'm still all for brick and mortar. I like to see what I'm getting, but those are things we have to look at, in the future too, is how commercial, happens. But again, I think there's a high number of units on a small area, but, again, we've talked about, and, Councilman, I made that point is for affordable and things like that, you're going to have to go up. Your densities are going to have to go up if you're going to try to help affordable housing. So that's that rub, that catch, that rock and hard place.
We've dealt with both sides, right? We're aware that there's a shortage of housing in the area, but we're also aware that there's been some parking issues in some of the projects that we've had that have created some concerns, physical as well as.
And we have some of the best models of showing how bad something can go on parking in our city. We really do, unfortunately. So
I think one of my things with this, Drew, is the applicant asks, so what can you do? Thumbs up, Caesar, thumbs down, Caesar moment. I think again, at the moment where I'm leaning to it, just explain it, what would be normally explained to anyone petitioning for this is to request for a zone change and then let it come back to the council.
right. And I just wanted, as you guys come to that decision of telling them, yeah, we feel comfortable enough for you to proceed, know that there may need to be some, and that's why I just wanted to come up and stand at the, there's going to have to be some negotiating. One way is you're going to accept their proposal and go above what the standards are. But usually when we do that, there should be a trade-off. When we do raise our things up, it's not just because, we like the suit you're wearing today, so we're going to give you more density. There needs to be something there that the benefit.
Right.
And again, if they're going to offer certain things that you think, we'll give you more density because you're meeting a target of our affordable housing. Right. That's a fair negotiation if you feel like as a council, or other things like that. Those are things you can use, but I just want everybody to be aware.
And this
it's already over built, but
this is one of the few that we've had come in that actually have a mechanism attached to their affordable housing. The FHA loan actually does supply something more to it than just a standard large development. So, yeah.
And appreciate they're not just using the A word out there like a lot of people do to make you feel nice and warm and, they'll use it, but
word on me, I feel so much better.
yes,
I appreciate that.
the affordable, we always hear that it's a buzzword, but I like to see a little meat behind it. And at least they have some meat. Whether it's enough for you is to be determined through the process.
I guess the reason why asking that, I apologize. The reason why asking that is I feel it's just important at this stage. I really appreciate what's been presented because we're always looking for ways to address the affordable housing within our community. We have a unique piece of property to consider. One thing that I fully support is going through a process of seeing how this not only impacts getting people into homes, but how does it connect into that area? Does it fit within our general plan? Does it also have the concepts of safety and meeting our road accesses and everything else? There's so much that must be discussed in something that's like this, not as a negative, but as a concept of meeting the safety and concerns, the overall fit within our community. And so I was asking that particular question and also coming back as an answer to a degree. I really feel like this council will consider anything but we'll consider it within the laws and ordinances which we have and the processes that are fair to our citizens so they can participate as well. Obviously, never been ashamed to say, man, how can we address affordable housing and attainable housing? Because I've yet to have that defined, but I'm really hopeful seeing the prices set out now to see if we could really make something like that work within our community. And I'm very hopeful that we can work into that.
Just 1 second before we go to there. Drew, help me understand, if we went with a PCD or a PUD with this, what mechanisms do we have on the books right now that would kind of maybe narrow the gap between the units per acre that we have?
Well, a PCD's out. I'm not making fun. It's just they're 200 acres or more,
Yeah.
and so this would have to fall under an R3 zone, or it's going to have to go to a PUD. Now, I don't know if they'd meet all our criteria on our PUD on the 50% of housing, square, footprint, and then the open space minus all the parking that's going to be in here. So I don't know if a PUD is really the way to go, because I don't want to bend that so much that it puts us in a bad light for other PUDs. I'd rather it probably go to an R3 multifamily type.
Is R3 16 or is
It is. That's why I'm still saying you're going to have to, again, that's why I brought up the 16. The PUD allows you to get some higher densities, but I don't think they have the land mass to be able to meet those criteria. That's why I'm not really, I haven't been able to pencil everything out, but I don't think they could meet all the minimums for the PUD. It's going to have to be something that you as a council is going to have to go in this development agreement. Just because you're looking for someone to bring you an affordable housing project, you're willing to do.
To be clear, so nothing really on the books zoning wise right now that we would have. This would be just new territory.
And on this one, I'm almost, again, I haven't got all the nuts and bolts, but I just looking and knowing some of the criteria on the PUD, I just don't think we could hit those, even to hit again, because to get higher densities in there, we allow for people to go above that. But there's the trade-offs, and I think they're already maxed out on everything they can do.
Okay.
So I guess one of the things that I feel on this, if the council feels the same, is by all means, the process come forward and apply for the zone change and allow us to discuss the needs and the abilities as we go forward. There's much to discuss, and a simple answer tonight I just really don't think is available, simply because there's so much within what we have in our zoning available and also what we can work within our sustainability as a city, how this would change and impact everything around it. And so I would be in full favor to see if this could be moved forward and discussed and go through our planning commission, come back through us, discuss it, and have some time to look through it, and just follow the process that we have in place. I don't think we can jump that process and give any type of a commitment at this stage.
But we do have a workshop meeting here before us. So I'd really like to, if you wouldn't mind just hanging close, Drew, have the applicant come back up and respond to what you've said. Because we just further this conversation just a little bit while we've got everybody here together, I think.
Yeah, we both served the same mission, we found out a
What?
couple months ago.
Yeah.
Last year?
Thank you.
Oh, wow, you look
Thank you.
great. He said how old he is,
Yeah. So what we have found going FHA is that these young people cannot afford 2 cars, period. It's not possible. They can't have 2 cars and have payments on 2 cars and afford to get the loan. We've put 2 parking stalls per unit on all of these developments and we put that in the development agreement because the cities are nervous again. We enforce it very tightly. And what we found is 1.6 parking stalls per unit maxes out. And we've hired an independent engineer to go verify that. Check these units at 2:00 in the morning when everybody should be home. And they have either scooters or bikes.
So what is the other mechanism you're putting in there besides just saying that?
Well, we put that they can only have 2 parking stalls, and one of them is assigned and one of them is unassigned. And so they can't have 3 cars.
Where are you putting that?
But based on the,
In the CCNRs and on the site plan.
but based on the current layout, there's only like 1.7 parking
No,
stalls per unit.
there's not 2.
No. Based on,
That's because we've gone through that iteration to begin with, was coming in.
Come up here, please.
So that's what we're seeing is that there's not two
Oh,
right
well,
now.
yeah.
There's not.
Because we agree with you that there's,
Yeah,
I mean,
and
you
so-
probably don't need 3 cars for a 2-bedroom home, but we definitely need 2 because people are around here, everyone drives a car, even one they might not have loans on them all, but they all have at least a car or something.
Well,
and
with
we
that
found that
location-
everybody needs at least one car, but the second car, they normally don't have it. And normally they have a scooter or bike, and they park the scooter in front of the car in the stall. So
But it's a tough area because, I mean, you look at the location of that, there's not a lot of places you can go to work from that location on a scooter. That's right off Telegraph there. And
I know, but
No,
you'd be amazed, the young people, when they want to be in the game and own something, they're happy to have their wife take them or their husband take them or ride their bike.
we're seeing that from our side, we're seeing the creativity in finding places to park, not in finding ways to get around it or finding just less expensive vehicles to drive.
Well, and one thing we can explore, and I know we've done this on other projects where the land density becomes an issue, is then you start looking at things like you bring into the equation of parking stalls, motorcycle and scooter stalls. And then you also bring into the equation compact stalls. That's one thing we forget a lot of times, that there actually is a compact stall ability in there where you reduce X amount of your sizes of your vehicles down of a compact stall that still provides the parking stall where, again, the majority of these kind of users are going to have a smaller vehicle. Another chunk of them are going to either ride motorcycles or use scooters. Where our office is in downtown St. George, we have a huge amount of in the parking area, and this is for people who are on. It's at a facility where a lot of people. There's around the clock. It's caption call. They have around the clock shifts, but you see probably 12 to 15 motorcycles or scooters in that parking area every day. And those are so. Yeah, I mean,
I don't
part
want
of
to create a parking problem. That's the last thing I want to do in a project like this. I don't want to go in and go, okay, I'm going to go smoke the council and not have enough parking.
What am I saying that? I'm literally leaning on your experience of this type of project
It
to
is.
respond to parking problems that you've seen in the past.
And what Brady just brought up, the last one we're in the construction, is 1.35 cars per stall or per unit. So I think we went to 1.7.
We're at 1.7 on this one, and that's why you see the number.
Is there public transportation by that project?
There will be.
And we don't have that yet.
No, but we anticipate that.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not coming, but that's the big thing is currently there's no public transportation. And I
Yeah.
know we're working toward that down
Yeah, to answer your
Telegraph.
question, the closest stop to that particular area will probably be just across Telegraph, right around the Winter Haven area. So almost directly across the street will be our anticipated stop right there. So that would work.
Interesting.
And now we should have that.
And then the other thing, Drew, that we've looked at with Ben, and he can talk about this and correct me, that we thought we were very close to making this work for a PD.
Yeah,
It might be, but if you're trying to get, credits for higher density, that's what I was telling you is going to be the hard thing.
Here's the thing that we wanted to make sure at the end of the day for all of us here is affordability is also homeowners association fees. And we have discovered putting pools and all of that and all those wonderful things, these young folks are not interested in it because it costs them every month. So our association fee right now on these units are $70 a month. And so if you start saying, okay, we're going to give you higher density, but you're going to give us something like a pool, a clubhouse or something, then there's affordability goes out the window. Because they have to take that association fee and subtract it out when they're getting qualified at FHA. So we want to keep that association fee really down. We want to put some things in that they can gather and do, but it's not a high maintenance problem of taking care of it. It's easy.
Are you saying it's,
That makes sense.
And if you look at those projects, you'll see there isn't much on them.
No, it's just those are the very vehicles the city has used to maintain.
I understand that.
The longevity and the value of the product over time. So I get the math. It just puts us into, again, several different categories where we're nervous because it's taking away the tools we've used in the past to solve other problems.
I know, it's thinking outside the box, and I wish that I could load you all up in an airplane and fly you to Provo and go see some that are 40 years old that I developed, that all they basically have is a sports court and a pavilion. And you do things where if they want to go out and gather, they do. But what you find about these young folks, they find their entertainment outside living in the place. They don't get their entertainment living there. They're either doing it socially or through their church or through whatever they're doing. They don't want to pay for the entertainment in there. They just want to have a living space. They want to live there, and they want it well maintained, and they want it well managed so that we slap people's hands really hard if they get out of line. They want a sergeant in arms in this unit because it's their money and it's their investment.
All right, gentlemen, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Ben Willits.
Ben. I think what's important at this point is I think we've had great information. Appreciate Mr. Ellman. He's always eloquent in his information. But we want you to, I guess the point that I want to make is that we understand that affordable housing requires partners on all sides.
Mm-hmm.
We recognize the need in our city, and we're going to want to vet it out and make sure that it works. But for me personally, I recognize the need, and I encourage you to do your diligence to address maybe some of the things we talked about tonight as it comes forward. But I want to also commend you on your presentation. It is forthright, straightforward, easy to understand, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, we worked with Drew, I think, when we first came in with the original proposal. The PD had just been amended. There's some language in the PD that had been just amended at that time. And so we're looking for creative ways that we can make that work. And so again, with some of the things with the parking and densities and open space versus parking and compact stalls versus motorcycle stalls, or all those things that we're looking at saying, okay, how can we think outside the box of not just saying, well, we just need X amount of 9 by 18 parking stalls, which is what we're all used to. How can we make it work and tailor it to fit what the need and the use is and still provide that need there? Because of course we don't want people to now have to start parking out on Telegraph or around the corner up in the Bristol Park area. And so I think there's a lot of ways we can just, again, put our heads together and come up with what those creative solutions are, and looking in the PD language to figure out, well, what are those things because there's a lot of if-then clauses. If we do this, then you can do that. But if you don't do this, then you can't do that. And so we just look to see what are those if-then clauses that are going to be able to make it work and be specific to the project.
And here are some things that, taking from this, the feedback and the questions from the council, I've written down some things that I would hope you would include as you come back through the processes, addressing the density, however you want to do that, bring some solutions, address the parking. There were good questions on parking. We don't have time for this discussion tonight, but I would like to know how and who enforces the deed restrictions. I thought that's a very attractive part of it. Don't answer it tonight, but I'd like to see that at some point, whether you go straight zoning or come back with some PD. And last, I just want to make the point that as you bring this back, the transfer fee, if we're giving up some commercial, I like the idea of the transfer fee. We all, I think, concur that we like the idea of attainable housing. I know these are tough processes, but those are, 4 or so particulars that I'll be interested in hearing as we move forward, as you move forward.
Great.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate
Bruce.
it.
Thanks, Brady. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item 4, discussion regarding the proposed resolution supporting pro-life. Christina.
Thank you for letting me take a few minutes this afternoon to discuss the pro-life resolution with you. I believe that we live in a critical time in history. I think that our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren are going to be very interested in the issues that we found important enough to be involved in. At our pro-life rally on Saturday, one of the speakers asked the question, what do you think you would have done if you had lived in Germany during the Holocaust? And it made me think, what would I have done if I had lived in the South during the era of slavery or any other time in the history of the world where horrible atrocities were taking place? Would I have had the courage to stand up and speak out? Because I think that the issue of abortion is that issue for us today. 3,000 babies are killed every year in the state of Utah. And it is because of that that I hope that this resolution will pass unanimously. While we may not agree on every issue that comes before the city council, I believe that you are all good men who are in these positions of leadership and service, not because you don't have anything else to do, but because you care about our community and about protecting our citizens. Councilman Staley asked me to discuss for just a minute the terminology of sanctuary in the resolution. And he, as you know, a resolution does not have the force of law. It's more like a mission statement for our city. And so sanctuary doesn't have any significant legal meaning. It's more symbolic. It lets the world know that the city of Washington honors and values human life and recognizes that we have an obligation to protect those who cannot protect themselves. If you have any other questions about the resolution or reservations about signing it, I hope that you will reach out to me, because I believe that eliminating this horrific practice of killing babies is the most important moral issue that we face today.
And within that, I appreciate that. I do have a concern about sanctuary city, though this is something that holds no law. I agree. In reading everything that you have proposed in here, do you find it necessary to put sanctuary city, or could you just be fine that we are pro-life in protecting citizens, including unborn, elderly, and the mentally, physically impaired? That seems to be in line with everything you've stated previously.
And that would be fine too. If the council is more comfortable with that kind of terminology, that's fine. The term is just symbolic, but if you're uncomfortable with that, that would be fine with us too.
It's not so much a matter of uncomfortability, simply because it is something that is being defined. If we said something more of a pro-life, I think it falls in line with everything that you want supported within this. And that's a very clear stance take, and it's something we support. But while some things are still undergoing a definition, I did some research about, in America right now, we have 300 cities that are considered sanctuary cities. And normally, as a national trend, what that means is we have less of a desire to comply with federal and state law enforcement, specifically on immigration. And if I felt like what you're proposing was something about immigration, it puts us in a different conversation. But since everything you have is so beautifully written about life, the pro-life, and I do understand the concept of saying, well, we protect those who can't protect themselves.
Right.
I think that what is appropriate, both in the terminology and mission you've stated, I would be fine with the pro-life or something comparable to a pro-life statement, because that is who we are. I'm not saying that we don't want to support people in that who cannot protect themselves. It is something just of a statement of, we support dearly those who put their lives on the line for us to protect our city and also protect our nation. And also, we are a very welcoming community. There's not a doubt about it. But as I think more and more, what you're really trying to say is the concept of what you led into this is the 3,000 abortions a year in Utah. And that says very clearly, and also the mentally impaired, physically impaired, the elderly. I think that pro-life completely honors the concept of what you're trying to say. But
Councilman,
let's just push forward on that.
Are you recommending then that we just replace the word sanctuary with
Yeah,
pro-life?
just a very simple thing, and if that's okay.
It could be misunderstood.
That's the thing.
And I understand it has that connotation.
But
and
I also
so-
think it allows to, I don't think it detracts. And that's the thing that I was trying to sit back and hear from your point of view, because this is a very beautiful thing to propose for our city. I love everything that's said about it. And if one little word, if it doesn't, I wanted to hear from you if it would really detract if we switched more of a pro-life.
No, I think
rather
that would
sanctuary.
be great.
And that's the only thing, because I really think it both honors and clarifies at the same time. And it would really support me as a council member feeling better about it. Simply because there's just some, it's not always said the same here.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that would be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? What I'd like to do,
Well, I just, I mean, I'm sure we're not making a decision on this tonight. I just want more time to review it and stuff and just because it hit our packet.
It's a
yesterday.
It is on-
It's
it
a
is on-
discussion item for the vote on tomorrow.
Tonight.
Are we voting on it tonight?
The new
Yeah.
tomorrow's tonight.
Oh, that's right.
No, I'm
Thankfully,
with
it's a
you, and that's what I
one-page.
thought. I understand it's one page, and I went through it, and I just feel like we need a little more time because there's a lot of bad things that happen in the world, and sometimes things are necessary.
I feel
I'm a
one,
pro-life type of guy, but I mean, rape. I also believe in the right for women, if they've been raped, to do what they need to do, because why should they deal with that?
So if it's okay for me to address
Yes.
those, because I had some concerns about those too. I had concerns about what about if a woman's health is at risk and cases of rape and incest. And so I did quite a bit of research, and I found a perinatologist who explained that there is never a situation where a mother's health necessitates an abortion. And he clarified it this way. He said, there may be times when a baby needs to be delivered early. And because of a premature delivery, even after heroic efforts of trying to save the baby, it may die. But that's very different than aborting a baby or killing a baby to save the mother. Delivering the baby early is different. And so I hope you recognize the difference there. And then in case of rape and incest, I listened to several people who had been conceived that way. And they said, what makes someone think that I'm less of a human because of the way I was conceived? And so I understand, your concerns there. This is not, like I said, it's not force of law. It's a resolution that promotes the sanctity of life. And I hope that helps a little bit.
Well, I understand your concern. I understand your point. I just think I just have a hard time going down this road saying, because I'm pro-life, I am. But I think sometimes it's necessary when I think we need to leave an option for the option. If you feel like that, I've never been raped. I don't know how that, I don't know those things, but that situation, I don't know how to explain it. You're explaining a scenario that there isn't, that they were glad that it went forward. But I'm sure there's situations where I'm glad there's situations they weren't happy that they went forward, as far as maybe on the mother's side and how she dealt with it. I've heard of bad experiences that way. So it's just another point of view, and I just don't want to make sure that I know it's not law, but I just want some more time to look at this and review it and make sure we're not infringing on other people.
Okay.
And I would certainly respect your right to do that. Ms. Wagner, I want you to know that I have studied this issue out, and I'm willing to wear my courage right in front. I support it completely. And I know that there's provisions put into the bill at local, state, federal levels for those people that are in dire circumstances, that they always have that option. This is merely a statement that Washington City supports life and the right to have those children. And I do not mean to disregard any other council members' opinions, and I want them to be able to vet it out themselves. I'm merely speaking for myself. I want to thank you for being here.
And I understand you wanting to think about that. Yes.
I think one thing, just as a point of talking it through, the main issue I love about this is to protect those who can't protect themselves. And your Councilman Coates brought up a really unique part of our society, of those who go through rape and stuff. And which
Sure.
This is a good thing. Life is always a valued thing. Our community is a family-based community. We are such supportive of the idea of the concept of what is a family and how does it benefit society. It is, as you found, difficult when we have people with many different backgrounds coming together to say something is, this is who we are as a city. And we take that concept very personally. And I appreciate Councilman Coates' point of view of what he was talking about. We all know someone, let's just say it that way, right? We all know someone who was in this position and why it was a good and why it was a bad. Though it is always a reason to consider those cases, as a general hope, I think it is not inappropriate to hope that this is something that we would be a norm for our community. But at the same time, not be blind to the concepts that there are cases where are absolutely not only justified, but also in aid in protecting those who can't protect themselves in those scenarios. I don't know if it has the right language, and what Councilman Coates would like to see in that, but I don't know if we can fully address the 360 of everything within this issue. I guess what's really before the council tonight in this discussion is it sufficient to represent as a resolution, not as a law?
Right.
Not, I think my thoughts have been heard, and I feel good about mine. If Councilman Coates would like to table this and push this to later, and maybe propose some other wording that you feel comfortable within this, or to talk with the applicant, I think it's going in the right direction of what we are as a city. And if there's something that could be made better with it, I would support just maybe tabling the issue and giving it a little bit more time, and maybe just adding those last little things, if that wouldn't be obtrusive to what you've put before us. Just,
No, that's fine.
and maybe that might be an option to consider tonight, if that would be better. And, but as all, I appreciate you being so willing to hear my points of view on that. And I think it is a beautiful statement as it is. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Christina. I think what we can do when we get to that point in the next meeting, we can discuss that.
Yeah, I was just, there's a chance I'll miss the first meeting in February. And I appreciate varying points of views. I personally am very supportive of this. And so I would like to this to be on an agenda when I'm here and able to vote on it. I want to be on the record as for this particular issue, irrespective of every varying views.
So noted. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, discussion of policy and legal requirements for public hearings.
Thank you, Council. So I'm going to try to cut to kind of the discussion points I think that you're all were hoping to get to on this. So don't be misled by the generalized training that looked like the memo I sent you. That's a generalized training only. You'll have that at some point every year, no matter what. But we wanted to cut to, and so redirect me, Mayor and council members, when we want to refocus, come back into something that you're concerned about or you want clarifications on, so we can kind of discuss those and get to those points. So under state law, so first of all of our land use regulations by local municipalities are governed by the Land Use Act of Utah, so LUDMA. And so any provision there that requires any type of a notice, any type of a hearing, any type of a meeting, any type of a process has to be complied with if it's for a land use decision. It simply does. That's the minimum that has to be done, but it has to be complied with no matter what. By local regulation, you can't minimize that. In other words, you can't let Drew just determine because you think it's a better process or because Drew, in his articulate wisdom, is able to cut to the chase faster, that you simply can appoint him as the land use body that makes that determination. The next thing is, however, that you as a council for land use decisions, you can always provide stricter regulations. You can add additional items that are required. So if you have a process in which state law requires that it go first to the Planning Commission for a recommendation, and that it has to be at a notice public hearing. Once received by the city council has to, the city council by state law is not required to have a public hearing for zone change. Any regulation, any of your land use regulations, general plan, zonings, so your PCDs, when you're drafting ordinances. Now, although state law requires you to have the public hearing and all the notice provisions go to the Planning Commission, has to be done first. So the public has their opportunity coming to talk to those you've appointed to give you recommendations about regulations, about how that's done. That has to be a public hearing, specifically hearing, which means that the public is invited to give comments. You have to give certain notice out to them. That's the intent. Simple openness with your public, that transparency with your public, that's not the absolute point of public hearing. Public hearings are transparent, and you're inviting the public to come in give their opinion if they want to about what you're doing. Public meetings, however, never require comments to be taken by state law, ever. That's a decision at the local level as elected officials you can make. If you want to still hear from somebody, you can. You're not required to. When it goes to a city council at that next stage, after they've complied with the public hearing of any land use regulation, is then it is forwarded on to the planning commission, who can accept that recommendation, reject it, or modify it. That's just the way the law is written. So oftentimes there's a little bit of conflict between the two bodies because of that. But you're not required to have the hearing. However, if you go to the extent of saying, well, we still want a hearing, we want a hearing here. I worked for a city several years ago that wanted 2 public hearings for every single land use decision. You had 4 public hearings, all which had to be given notice for say, a zone change or just changing your land use ordinance. It would take 3-4 months because they added what would have in effect been 4 additional public hearings plus the timing involved with it, because they wanted that much input from the public, or they wanted to make sure the public felt more confident in their particular legislative body at the time, because there had been a lack of it. We have, just to be clear about it, our ordinances do state that we will have a public hearing at the city council level. So we've been doing that correctly. And so each of our zone changes in chapter 13 and others, 9, 13, others, they'll give you the idea of that. First, it goes to public hearing to the planning commission. Then after a recommendation has been given, then the city council is to schedule a public hearing for that same matter. Again, we didn't have to, but through the years, that's what the city council has decided. All cities don't do that. Ours did at one point. Having said that, you're the decision makers now in terms of if you wanted to change that, if you wanted to say, you know what, I think we get the public's input at those first public hearings. Our planning commission does a great job at eliciting those comments and that feedback and that information. Our staff gives us great information about how they feel about it, how that may be processed. And now the planning commission has given us a recommendation on top of the other information, public hearing comments and the staff input to you. The city council may then make that determination for that regulation. But there's no requirement for a public hearing. It has to be done in a public meeting. It still has to be transparent. Your citizens all get to come and watch you do that. You don't necessarily, you don't need to solicit or take comments from the public at that hearing, at that meeting.
So as I understand it right now, what we're doing as a council, previous to what we may consider tonight, is above and beyond what the state statute is.
Right.
And in going back, I reviewed past councils and called and asked them their opinions about this. And I wanted to figure out why we deviated, because we've done back and forth on both, going to the state statute minimum and moving forward without having the 2-week layover. We've also
And the 2 weeks, a different issue. So I'll come back to that though. That's a different issue that kind of expands this discussion if you want me to get to that. And
No,
so you can kind of weed it into each other.
go ahead and keep on going.
Let me just weave it in, and if it helps, great. If not, cut me off and get to where you want to go with it. So the decision to provide public hearings on each of those land use regulations, that has been made years and years and years and years ago. It's already incorporated in our ordinances. The decision to basically by policy of the city council, to automatically take something that's a land use decision, to continue that matter for the underlying actual voting to either accept, reject, or modify it until the next city council meeting, was a recent decision by the city council that I can only speak for myself and maybe for staff also, the understanding of why that was done. But one, it's not within our ordinance. We're not required to do it. It's not in our ordinance. 2, even without that kind of internal policy that had been followed consistently for the last I don't know, 6 months to a year. The
It's been-
city
it's
council
been-
would have
it's
the
been
right.
Over 2 years.
More than 2.
Yeah.
Well, when you get to be my age, it's compacted much
Everything
more.
6 months.
Yes, yeah, everything 6 months. Which is a good reason to keep on following it with the same city council. The policy they kept it consistently. It didn't confuse the public. That transparency stayed there. However, the city council, let's say nobody's ever even talked about that. Not one time in its life. We don't have that. We haven't done it one time. A city council at any time has the right, when an item comes up for the consideration, to make a decision. So this isn't the public hearing part. This is the making a decision on a specific action. City council can decide amongst itself to say, you know what? I would really like to digest what I've heard, what I've read from staff, and in our case, we had public hearing, what might be additional public information that came in at a hearing, in addition to what came in at the planning commission level. Usually it's about 90% overlap, but either way, you might just want to say, I think I'd like to just digest that. I'm gonna table it until next week. That particular item, I want to table it till the next city council meeting. This body has a right to do that, irrespective of whether or not that's something that has been done consistently.
But right, but then we get into a situation where we have the problem of being arbitrary and capricious because we're making a judgment call at the time on some or not another. I mean, I think.
And that's why
talk
it's
to me
your
about-
call.
Well, so even even if you just kind of set the standard of when there was public clamor or outcry, I think you can get into situations of problems both ways. So I think, from my understanding of talking to previous councils who helped design this, their intention was just to say, look, we shortened it on the planning commission side, we brought this forward, then we lengthened it on the city council side to be even and fair across all applicants. There's a 2-week holdover. We have the public hearing, and then 2 weeks later, we vote on it.
I'm not sure I understand about the shortening on the planning commission side. I hope
That was
we-
my understanding from both staff, a couple staff members that I talked to, as well as previous council members, that in an effort to actually add the 2 weeks on for the holdover, that they took some efforts, and I guess I didn't ask specifically which ones, but there were efforts. Actually, they did say it. I just don't recall them. They took some efforts on the front end to shorten that for the planning commission, not necessarily the time between the hearing and the voting, but other actions. Roger, is that clear? Is that correct?
I hope we didn't.
I can't remember. I mean,
Okay.
I can't speak right to
No,
that
that's
point.
fine.
But I'll only just say I mean, we've been kind of trying to be consistent with this
Yeah.
process. And again, the process itself, we didn't see was really flawed in and of itself with the 2 week. I think the question more is, what kind of controls does there need to be with respect on
What-
that?
it's
Well,
still
I
the
think,
same
and
thing. It's
largely,
still-
we're not talking about issues that come before us that just start, that nobody's opposing them. They're just everybody's kind of expecting it. The issues, I think what we're trying to address are times when people have real concerns and they have problems. And I spoke to a developer or an individual who had worked for a developer who had been a part of a very difficult, the citizens had one idea, the developer had another idea. He was actually very much for the 2-week holdover, especially in cases where there were issues and disagreements between the citizens and the developer.
But that's not much of an issue when if you think about it. We're trying to see it from staff's perspective. I'm trying to see it just from stepping back and doing this for 30 years of how when it gets askew, when people start losing faith in their legislative bodies,
Yeah.
and when it's consistent, when people have faith in what is being done and what transpires in front of them. And the public hearing aspect of that, either way, if that were a public hearing at this stage, let's say the only public hearing you had was at the planning commission level. 2 days later, as city council, you were receiving the transcripts or the recordings. Yeah, the recordings of those public hearings. You got to hear what the community was, what the input was. You got the whole list of things.
So
You're thinking about and talking about
planning
it.
on holding on this, but that is not actually correct. I may not get to hear what I want to hear if we, and again, I guess we're doing two issues tonight, and maybe I shouldn't mix the two together, but if the planning commission, if the public hearing is only held at the planning commission level, then I don't necessarily get to ask either the developer, or the people who came and with concerns, those questions. I have to rely on
You can still ask them.
another body to do.
You're not
to ask.
prevented from hearing. That's the difference.
And I would.
You can
think
still
maybe
hear it. And this, here's my experience with Washington City versus almost most of the cities that I've either worked for or represented landowners in front of. And that is, Washington City has so consistently been willing to listen to the public when they show up, whether it's a hearing or not a hearing. In some ways, it's become a non-issue because it almost universally over 30 years at that non-public hearing stage, just at the meeting stage, the presiding mayor and city council said, yeah, you know what? I think I do want to hear from you. Go ahead. They've done it anyway.
But here's the thing on public hearing. If there's no one here, we just close it. We open it and close it. It's not a big
Exactly.
deal. I personally don't think there's a big deal with having a public hearing for land use items only. I just don't
Counsel?
want to extend past that.
Go ahead.
Well,
It's-
this has nothing, and I'm not proposing either way. We want to do how you want to do it.
Okay. Okay, Craig, go ahead and finish, and then I think we're going to need to continue this, Jeff, because our meeting's at 6.
All I was stating was that on land use, general plan changes and zone changes,
And regulations.
my personal opinion is we have public hearings in planning commission and city council so that the public can voice to both bodies. And if there's not a public hearing, then and I understand we can read it, but I agree that we can have different interaction with the residents and have communication with them on a public hearing standpoint. The thing I want to make sure is that it's clear that we can have that open dialogue on land uses because they're such big things between property owners that I feel like we need to have that at that level. Anything else after that, they're already vested in that land use.
And then, so
Then it changes, in my opinion. I don't think we need to have.
So let's say you
public hearings on
decide to stop there.
preliminary plats and final plats. I don't think we need to have that because they're already vested. As long as they're falling within the rules and the
Oh, yeah.
ordinances that we have, then they're vested and we shouldn't hold.
Those
public
aren't
hearings.
but those aren't land use regulations you're making decisions. Those are land use decisions. Those are something that's already set in stone. If they comply with whatever your decisions were for regulation, you have to give them. So that's a different animal than the ones we're talking about where we have the issues right now of city council having a public hearing on something that the planning commission has already had a public hearing on.
But I think we should have that on land uses. That's
So on land use, and that's fine.
I'll back up.
Craig, so when would you want to vote on that? Immediately after that?
That's the second issue now.
So-
Now
so
what do you want to
that
do at that
second issue,
point?
I think unless there's contention, you should table it at that point. I don't think there should be a 2-week
Mayor, may I
holdover
clarify
unless.
something?
Sorry.
So you wouldn't want it to be automatic?
No, I do. If you've closed the public hearing, you've heard the discussion, we've had discussion between groups, there's no reason why we can't vote on it unless there's major
No,
contention.
you wouldn't want it to be
Council-
automatic that it's continued for 2 weeks for the underlying
Yes, I don't think
decision.
it should be automatic continued
Okay.
unless there's just reason from the council to do that.
If that's the case, here's a,
Typically would vote after.
Right.
But if
'Cause-
there's all these concerns and all these problems, yes.
here's my
Well,
here's my
which-
only recommendation for you to think about as we take this up again. These are the only two things I want you to think about. If you did it that way, you kept a public hearing for the city council level also. So you still have the two ones. And you don't have an automatic 2-week period. If it's going to be continued, you should do like you would any other time for any agenda item you were going to make a decision on, and you put it on your agenda. People showed up for it to hear what you were going to do. So my recommendation and staff's recommendation is if you do that, have a legitimate reason for it. Don't just say, well, it was contentious tonight, we're continuing. It should be based on, I need to absorb what I've heard tonight, especially the new stuff I've heard. I want to absorb it. I don't want to be pushed into just the emotions of the day, making my decision. You ought to make a basis on the record of why you're continuing the vote to whenever you're doing it. And in the interim, that's where we start getting really murky if we're taking
So-
additional information.
So I'm going to just jump in there because this is another issue that I talked to previous councils about, and it was one that sounds really simple to just say, well, if it's a contentious issue. But you have to put yourself in the position of the citizens who came out to that, especially a contentious issue. So you have a large group of citizens who came out to hear this issue, and then you decide at that time to hold it over for 2 weeks. At that point, then they're saying, wait, why did you hold that over for 2 weeks? We expected you to hear us and vote on this. Now, why are you delaying it? Why do you have to hold
That's
it
why I
back?
say you ought to have a legitimate
You
reason.
kind of open yourself for, to say that, it was recommended that we put it at 2 weeks. Everybody gets 2 weeks. The builder can actually plan that into their agenda. They know when it's coming. They know when it's going to happen. If there's really something big that we have to study, we use that for the holdover.
And I'd like to hear
That
about
gives-
more about the front end, what we were talking about with speeding up the process on the front end, whether
Let's-
that's accurate or not.
So Mayor,
Thank you.
one quick thing too is, and I hope the council understand intent, because if the intent's not the same with this council for having the 2-week holdover,
Right.
then there probably is no reason to have it. And we can discuss that at another time. But, I mean, they did it for a specific purpose, but this council may or may not agree with that. And if they don't agree with it, then
Do something.
Well, we haven't been in a council long enough to know if we agree on anything.
With that statement, thank you, Jeff, and we will continue this in
and
2
please.
weeks. In 2 weeks, we will continue this discussion in 2 weeks.
Because I can tell you, I don't enjoy representing those in courts when they get appealed. We almost always win, but it's almost never fun.
Thank you very much. And thank you, council. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to close the workshop? Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take a 5-minute break. Folks, we're going to give these guys a 5-minute break and then we'll start our city council meeting.